We have others trickling on. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to be really interactive in this space today. And I know sometimes it's difficult with over 100 people in one space to be completely and totally immersed into the work and into the platform. So we're going to be using a platform called Mural today. Not familiar if folks are familiar with Mural, but that's okay. Bina is going to put the link into the chat for Mural for you all to go ahead and put that into your browser, because as we mature through the presentation, we're going to be using Mural. So if you all would copy and paste the link into your browser just to get Mural up and going. So when we are ready to use it, there'll be not so many issues or problems. Those of you who do experience some issues with it, don't even worry about it. We got you on this end. Okay. So folks who are just coming into the room, welcome, welcome. We are introducing ourselves in the chat, names, pronouns, where you're calling in from. We are also putting in the Mural link into our web browsers as we're going to use some interactive activities in a few. Okay, we'll give folks another 2.5 seconds in translation, another like 60 seconds to get comfortable, and then we'll get started.
I don't see where the link is to copy it.
The Mural link. Okay, no worries. I will copy it for you.
It's showing in the chat. People just might not know how to get to see the chat.
Yes, okay. Well,
I can't get to it either.
Do you see, I put it again, I put it in the chat again. So if you open up the chat, there's a link in the chat. If you just copy and paste it or click on it, should be good.
And after you click on it, I know the term, put it in your browser. I just don't know how to do that. And I don't know where the browser is.
Nope, good question. So if you're in like Google or Safari and you're doing a search, put it in the search menu and then press enter.
Okay.
No, we got you, Susan. We got you.
I know how to do that.
Nice.
Let me go back to chat.
Folks who are just logging on, introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell us where you're calling from, your name, your pronouns. We are also getting ready to or prepping for our interactive experience in Mural. If you look in the chat, we have copied and pasted the Mural link. If you click on the Mural link, it'll just get you ready for what we're going to do a little bit later.
well, somehow trying to copy that thing, I ended up with something that says visiting rabbit.
Oh, Peter, listen, it's okay. I got you. We got you on this end. If it's not working, we got you.
Do I get rid of visiting rabbit somehow? Or
yeah, you can just X out the silly rabbit. Yeah, for sure.
And mine says the address isn't, so just get me too. Just get
okay,
me.
cool. We got you too. No worries. No worries.
How do you
we
get
got
back
you.
to Zoom?
Oh God.
This is old people talk.
It's cool. We got you.
Do you have me, Paula Bonnell?
Yep, we got you.
Okay.
Nice. All right. So it is 4:08 on this side of the world. And Daryl, you ready?
Let's go. Let's get it. We got everybody in the building. Everybody seeing they ready. Let's go. Let's go. Y'all ready? Thumbs up. Y'all can hear us. Come on, man. Let's go, man. On our side, it's 4 o'clock. I don't know what time where you at, but we're ready to go. How was parking? Was parking okay? Y'all found a place? No traffic issues? Let's get it.
Nice. Bina, next slide, please. All right, so welcome, folks. We are in session 1 of C4's Race Equity Training for Contra Costa County Health, Housing and Homelessness. Today is going to be a super interactive experience with myself and my colleague Daryl, which I will introduce, he will introduce himself in a second. You all, I know these platforms are interesting, especially when we're in a room together for almost 2 hours. And so our job is not to talk at you the whole entire time. Our role will also be for you all, or give space for you all to give us some feedback. How you want to do that, that's up to you. We are asking people to unmute themselves, to call out or speak out, use the chat functionality. If you all we'll be using Miro in a second. And if you can't use that, that's okay. Like I said, we got you. Bina, next slide, please. So I am Nastasia Moore, C4's training and technical assistance person, as well as I do HUD federal training and technical assistance on this side, focusing on racial equity and how to promote racial equity throughout COCs. And with me is our amazing, energetic ball of energy, Daryl. Daryl, where are you at?
Yeah, I'm here. So how are you? My name is Daryl McGraw. I have the pleasure to work with Bina and Nastasia on a regular basis. So I'm excited to be here to work with you. I am the Racial Equity Senior Manager of Racial Equity, Racial Justice and Equity. I also bring lived experience from the criminal justice system. I also I work with people with lived experience, so peers and recovery communities. And shout out to my people with lived experience on the call, because those are the people that, all right, I see you. Sean, I see you. I can't see everybody, so shout yourself out if you got lived experience in the chat box. That's what's up. We got to be at the table. We not only do we want to be at the table, we want to own the table, but that's a different conversation. We'll talk about that on the next call. So I'm excited to be here, and we're going to talk about racial equity and see what we can do.
Right.
Absolutely. I see you, Santos. I see you.
JC, nice. Let's talk about what we're getting into today. So let's go to centering race equity. We're going to be talking about why lead with race. Why do we want to center and embed race into everything that we do? Bina, next slide, please. We're going to be talking about the historical context of housing and homelessness. We cannot begin to have any conversation or any foundational learning until we give you a snapshot of where we are and how did we get here, right? Understanding some language and concepts. We all don't speak the same language. We think we are speaking the same language, but a lot of times we're not. And so we want to be on the same basis when it comes to these race equity terms and concepts, to better have meaningful dialogue, to have dialogue that's not only meaningful, but dialogue that is respectful, and dialogue that really moves the course when talking about race equity and equity principles. And then there's levels to this, right? And so we're going to be diving into the levels of racism and how they are tied to what you all do in your housing networks. But before we can even get into any of that, we have to have some courageous conversations. We have to come to some agreement. So next slide, please. Couple things. There is a protocol out there that was developed by Glenn Singleton, Thomas Linton. It's called the Courageous Conversations Protocol. Have folks heard about the Courageous Conversation Protocol? Yes, no, maybe so. It is a protocol developed to help folks like us have really intentional conversations, difficult conversations as it relates to race, racism, and privilege. And so there's 4 agreements, and this is the agreements that I would like all of us to agree to so we can move this thing on seamlessly. One of those things is to stay engaged. This is a Zoom platform. We cannot physically see you, hear you, or really touch you, right? And so I ask that folks stay engaged. When you are feeling like you are becoming disengaged, I'm asking folks to check themselves. You all are in a space where you can get up, you can stretch, you can grab a drink of water, you can take a smoke, do what you need to do to really come back and be centered here with us. Experience discomfort. Talking about race and racism can be uncomfortable. I even get uncomfortable in this space, one being a Black woman, 2, facilitating conversations in front of folks that I can't make real eye contact with, right? And so sometimes there will be some space or some things that we talk about that are uncomfortable, but that is okay. that is okay, because we have to become somewhat uncomfortable to become more comfortable having these conversations, right? The other thing I'm asking is for you all to speak your truth. What do you mean by that, Nastasia? I'm asking that we throw out all the politically correct stuff today and you all speak your truth. We're not talking for our bosses who may be on the line. We're not talking for our colleagues who may be on the line. I want folks to talk for themselves and speak your opinions respectfully. And so I'm asking that we throw out all the politically correct jargon out the window for the next couple of sessions, but starting with this one, just so that we can, meet folks where they're at. Accept and accept non-closure. We do not have all the answers today. Daryl, as the subject matter expert, doesn't have all the answers today. People who have been doing this work way before we were even thought of haven't figured out all the answers to ways to promote and solve racial equity in context. And so this is an iterative process, and we have to continue to work on the best solutions that fit you all's community and able to get some answers that are more equitable to you all. And so if you all agree with that, I just need folks to say, yes, we agree.
Yeah,
Yes.
Nice.
I agree.
Nice.
Yes, we agree.
Yes.
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 Agreed.
Yes.
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 Agreed. Yes.
I love it. 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 Okay, cool.
Yep.
Nice. Thanks, Rayshawn. All right. So let's talk about how comfortable folks are. So since we all agree, we can get into the meat of this. How comfortable are you talking about race and racism? And I'm going to launch a poll here. And so folks can start to respond. You are either totally comfortable talking about race and racism, you're somewhat comfortable talking about race and racism, or maybe you're not comfortable at all, and that's okay too.
It's about.
Okay, good folks.
I'm totally comfortable talking about it
You're totally comfortable talking about it. Nice. So we should be hearing from you through
all day long, any day of
all
the
day
week.
long. Nice.
Whatever minute you want to talk, we can talk about it.
I know that's right. Nice. Okay, nice. I'm gonna end the poll. So it looks like we have like a 50-50 split almost. A lot of people are totally comfortable. This is great. We have some people who are in between. You'll become more comfortable as we get through this stuff, I promise. And then we have some people who are not so comfortable. That's okay too. This is all a part of this learning experience. And so again, I got you, we got you, we'll meet you where you're at. Okay. Let's get into why lead with race. Daryl. Oh. Dina, next slide, please.
So you guys can hear me? Thumbs up. I like interaction, right? I got to make sure my screen ain't frozen. Y'all know I'm in the hood, right? So I got to make sure my system coming through, man. I got to make sure y'all we good, right? I heard Rashawn said he comfortable talking about race. So we're going to lead with race. Why? But why lead with race? Why do you think that we should lead with race? Anybody want to unmute themselves? Somebody that's feeling real comfortable. I like to hear from the 2% that don't feel, that's not always comfortable too. I always like to hear both sides. So anybody want to chime in real quick before we jump into the video?
Daryl, I'll jump in. This is JC from BAX.
Hey, come on in, JC. How you doing?
First of all, I love both of your transparency, so I'm very comfortable.
Cool.
Because it's real. I live in the Bay.
Okay.
I'm from the hood.
All right.
And I'm from Bayview Hunters Point specifically, where the location is totally gentrified. So this is a conversation. This is a courageous conversation that needs to be had.
Right.
Because it's very real.
Thank you. I respect it. You know, somebody from the hood, when they say I'm from such and such, you know, I'm from the West Side. So they ought to make sure you know exactly where they're from. They don't do that in the suburb. They'll be like, I'm from Strawberry Hill, 1544 Strawberry Hill. But when you're from the hood, you'd be like, I'm from West Side, east of this street. So I really appreciate that. Anybody else want to chime in real quick? Thank you, JC.
Hi,
No?
this is Diane White from East Oakland, and
Okay.
it's real and it has always existed.
Cool.
It's
cool.
not something that's just coming up. It's been here forever.
Right, right. Thank you, Miss Diane. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. Anybody else before we jump into that video?
Hi, this is
Oh, hold
Paula.
Hold on.
And-
Paul, Alex, we got you. Then Paula, let's go.
Oh, hi, I'm Alex. I'd say leading with race is important in housing conversations, especially because most of the housing policies led with racist and segregationist policies. So we need to start there to end it.
Alex, absolutely. We're going to be looking for you a little bit later on during our facilitation because we're definitely going to be talking about how policy plays a part in that.
Thank you, Alex. I want to make sure I got in the right room. Sometimes I go in the wrong room and they don't be talking right. So I want to make sure. Thank you. I appreciate you. Paula, did you have something?
I was just saying, I'm from San Francisco, born and raised
Okay.
in Geneva Towers.
Okay.
They're there. And I was part of desegregating Commodore Sloat. They bused a few of us
Mhm.
to the avenues in San Francisco. And it was a really eye-opener for me as a kid, a young kid. I need to say, my story is not like a lot of others. So
Right.
glad to be in this training today.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. Alex got some fans. He got some people in the box yelling he's the manager. You must be a good leader, Alex. I like it. So we're going to jump right into this video. Rock with us. Bina, can we punch up the video? Let's get some sound. No sound. Bina, we don't have sound. We're gonna have to reload that up. Give us a second. Give us a second. Everybody can hear that? Good, thumbs up. All right. So we started with this video right there. I seen some faces. I started looking around the room. I see some faces, people looking at it like some of you looking like this is not new. This is you know, something that we already very familiar with. The interesting thing is that a lot of times when we talk about why we lead with race, is because if we don't know, if we don't recognize where we come from, how do we know where we're going? And many of you have heard that before, but there's truth in that. We're gonna move to the next slide, and Nastasia is gonna talk about equity and equality. Let's go.
You all, so we talk about why equality is not enough. And so the world has been striving for equality, and folks who look like me, folks who look like Daryl, and a lot of you on the line, we haven't gotten equality either. And so what we're striving for is equity. I have used this term, and a lot of you have heard me say it like maybe 1,000 times, and we're not even an hour into this, but meeting people where they're at, right? Giving folks the resources and materials that they need on an individual basis. That's how we need to start looking at equity. We want to start centering equity and embedding equity and looking at this based off people's individual needs. There's a thing called targeted universalism, and targeted universalism is used across COCs, is used in organizations to really target where equity needs to be embedded into systems, policy, structure, services. And so what we want to do is, beyond the targeted universalism, which we'll talk about in later sessions as a framework to achieve equity, I want us to think about why equality isn't enough. And I'm just going to let you all brainstorm on that piece. But what we're shooting for is equity here. So why is context necessary? Next, please. Daryl.
My slide didn't move. I was frozen for a minute. So what does the data tell us? And using the data to tell a story in context is next, right? So we're gonna go, why is it important? Why we look at the data? You know, they always say the numbers don't lie, right? So we're gonna go right into the data piece, right? Next slide, Bina, please.
So let's talk about the data. So one of the things I always like to elevate about data is it's not always matchy-matchy. Okay, what do I mean by that? Sometimes the numbers don't match narratives, right? And so, for instance, we are going to look at, this is a part of bringing you into like how we got here. We look at national numbers of people experiencing homelessness. And what we see are Black folks make up this much of the general population, so about 12% of the population, but 42% of folks of that population experience homelessness. That's almost 3 times the general population. Huge disparity. We look at Native Americans, they're 4 times as likely. We look at Pacific Islanders, they're 9 times as likely to experience homelessness based on or looking at their general populations. What is the story behind the numbers? And so we want to look at, if we fast forward, next slide, please. I want to look at your local numbers. So what do you look like locally? I'll let this sit here for a second as people look at the graph. But this is homeless populations by Richmond, Contra Costa County. We pulled these numbers from HUD COC Race Equity Tool. Not sure how many data folks are on the line or data folks are familiar with HUD COC Race Equity Tool, but pretty much it pulls from the ACS, so the American Community Survey, and then the point in time data that COCs submit every year. And so what it does is it takes a snapshot of 5-year estimates of where people are at in general population, where people fall in deep poverty, and then folks who experience homeless. What I want folks to really zoom into are the Black and African American numbers. And so you see 9% of general population, 9% is the general population, 16% goes into deep poverty, and then 34% of folks experience homelessness compared to their general population. That's almost 4 times that folks are overrepresented. So my question is this: what happens between folks being in, general population, versus folks falling into deep poverty and then experiencing homelessness. I question the system structure for folks who look like me. I question, what does coordinated entry look like? How accessible is the front door? What resources are readily available? What communication is happening between folks coming into deep poverty and going into homelessness? We look at Native Americans. They make up less than 1% of the COC's population. They also make up about 1% of those deep poverty numbers, but then they end up being 14%, which experience homeless. That's huge. That's almost 14 times. Again, what is happening from the time they go into the deep poverty, from the time they go into homelessness is what we're questioning here. You look at all other populations, right? All other populations seem pretty consistent, as their general populations don't exceed the number of folks experiencing homelessness. So what's different between the populations and resources, services, networks, formal and informal networks? So those are some of the things we want to begin to look at as we, one, utilize a racial equity lens to look at the data, two, question what the story behind the data is. And then three, I want to let you all know that you're not alone. A lot of the communities that we work with across the nation look somewhat similar to this. And so you're not alone in this process of having these great disparities across racial and ethnic groups. So I want to talk about how the heck did we get here? So doing just some timeline highlights. Again, I think historical context is really important because one, when we begin to reflect on our history and our progress towards racial equity, not a lot has changed. Our history's residual effects of systemic and institutional racism continues to permeate throughout our communities, our neighborhoods of historically marginalized populations. And so this is why I believe, or we believe rather, this snapshot in time will build greater context in terms of where we are in our housing, homelessness, and racism. So if we could go to the next slide, please.
Nastasia, let's stop for a quick second.
Yeah.
Lavana has a great question. Lavana, are you there? You in the building?
I am in the building.
Oh,
Hi, everyone.
great.
Lavana.
Want to ask that question? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you both, you want to jump in?
Sure. It's a question that I think we've historically asked in our continuum of care, but there's been guidance over the years from HUD on how to capture the Latinx population and as a race versus an ethnicity. And there has been training over the years around capturing the ethnicity sort of instead of as a race, that you had to capture them as either white or Native American as a race. And we all know that many don't identify as such, but we were sort of forced in these boxes. So I'm interested to really understand if the information that's being captured on the HUD website, the data, really is sort of that mixture of sort of our system of care or individuals identifying as a specific race, particularly Native American, that bumps that number up high.
Awesome. That's a great question.
Something to explore.
Yes.
No, I really. I just wanted to jump in there because one of the populations I work with a lot is in the criminal justice world, and when we're incarcerated, sometimes, when I was incarcerated, I spent 10 years of my life in and out of the Department of Corrections. But the interesting thing is that one of my friends who I grew up with, Latin brother, on his ID, it said he was white. And I said, yo, man, why? You ain't white. We grew up in the same hood. I know your mother. I ate at your house. He said, I know that. He said, but when I came in, the guy said I would get out quicker if I kept it this way. And sure enough, Juan was in a program and out. And all through his correctional career. So it was based off of what someone said or his perception of Juan. who I knew was not white, but perception, right? And how many times do other systems, right, or people like that can pass? Okay, let's talk about it. We have a real conversation if you can pass and go as white to get certain benefits, whereas certain people like myself, I'm not passing for nothing. I've been to DR once. They did speak to me in Spanish in DR because they thought, but that was the only place I was ever mistaken for something other than black. So come on, Nastasha, let's keep going. I just wanted to point that out. Look, Lavana, I want to appreciate your question, and we could get back to that as we keep moving forward. But that is something that we should be looking at, like how many people are either misrepresented or looked at in a different way, like categorized in a different way for whatever reason, funding sources, what have you, because that goes to show that some of the numbers would be incorrect. Thank you for pointing that out. Anybody else want to chime in, pop in the chat box? You familiar with something like that? Let's keep moving.
I'm gonna keep going. There's some really good questions, Susan. What's the different distinctions between race and ethnicity? We're gonna talk about that. And let's see, I think we're gonna talk about systemic and institutional pieces to this as well. So all great. Okay, so let's get into the housing timeline. I wanna start off with racially restrictive covenants. Let's move on to the next one, please. So racially restrictive covenants was a response, you all, to the Great Migration, a time where Black folks migrated from Southern states to Northern states for greater opportunity that the South didn't provide. These covenants were legally enforceable contracts imposed in deeds of property that restricted folks who look like me the ability to purchase property, lease property, occupy property, all of the above, right? These same restrictive covenants were not only exclusive to Black folks, they were also meant for Asian population, Jews, Catholic, Irish, other historically marginalized populations were also restricted on deeds held in these covenants. And so if you read here closely, it says, no persons of any race other than the white race shall use or occupy any building, any lot, except for the covenant. For this covenant shall not present occupancy by domestic servants of a different race domiciled with an owner or tenant. And so real estate agents use these restrictive covenants to protect white investment, to attract white buyers into purchasing property. White homeowners, folks, were legally prohibited from selling to Black, Indigenous folks of color and other historically marginalized groups. Because if they did so, they would violate the restriction. They could be sued, they could be held financially liable. And so these restrictive covenants stuck around for a long time. Even today, you will probably see something similar like this in old property deeds. Let's move on to the next slide, please. We talk about the FHA mortgage insurance requirements. So we get into redlining. And so what you're looking at now is a red line map of San Fran. So the redlining by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, they created these maps of every metro area in the nation that basically told banks where and where they could not approve home loans. These maps document how loan officers, appraisers, again, the real estate professionals evaluated mortgage lending risk. And so what role did the FHA play? You all can popcorn in because I know you all know your history. So the role that FHA played was huge, okay? They were huge in the role of actually legalizing and institutionalizing racism and segregation. And so they created these national set of standards for assessing mortgage risk into a system A to D. A being the best, D being deplorable, right? The most hazardous. It didn't matter, folks. It didn't matter if, if the predominantly Black community or area was made up of middle-class folks, it was still deemed as risky. And so as a result, folks who look like Daryl, folks who look like me, we had a difficult time simply getting mortgages based on how we identify, based on our race, right? And so fast forward, the FHA was originally created to do what? Boost home ownership, especially during that Great Depression area. But this didn't happen. The FHA said, you know what? Yep, give loans to everybody. You get a loan, you get a loan, you get a loan. You get a loan even though you can't pay it back, and you get a loan even though your credit is not where it's supposed to be. Oh, but there's a clause, just don't give it to Black folks. It's kind of how it worked. If we move forward, if we move forward to talking about the unenforceable restrictive covenants, and so civil rights lawyers, they got together, they started challenging these covenants, they started challenging redlining practices and policies in the court. And even though the courts based these covenants unconstitutional, they were never ever fully enforced, because these covenants were private agreements. These covenants were not covered under any laws preventing them to seek discrimination in most states. So folks, what do you think happened? Well, what happened is this: these covenants and steering Black folks into non-white neighborhoods by agents, it never stopped. We can see how our history has kind of repeated itself in our own homelessness networks of steering folks into certain neighborhoods, not steering folks into neighborhoods that they which is like a first choice, but whatever is most appropriate, as I'm using quotes here, most appropriate. And so we continue to see these patterns in cities as a result of unenforceable restrictive covenants. If we go on to if we keep moving forward to talk a little bit about exclusionary zoning. And I know my folks are monitoring the chat. So if anything,
oh, it's on fire. It's on
on
fire.
fire. Okay,
It's
cool,
on fire.
cool.
We got leadership in the building. So I really appreciate
Nice.
the leadership is there. It's on fire. I mean, I'm just trying to, hose it down a little bit, but there's definitely some great quotes, and people are definitely pointing out some key facts.
Nice.
Like, just singing. I would like to think about like these, we're talking history, but many of you guys know that this is still happening right now. When we start to talk about Section 8, you talk about criminal records. You can't go here because you can't go back to where you might have left there, but now because you have a certain charge or something on your jacket, or so, people are still being discriminated against right now. This is why these conversations are important to have, to equip you with the knowledge. So when we do need to be starting to make changes, especially those of you that with lived experience that are at the tables advocating, you need to be well-versed with what you're asking for. Because a lot of times when you talk to politicians and legislators, they're not as knowledgeable as us, right? So we want to make sure that you are equipped with the correct information. Come on, man, this is what we're doing. Let's go.
Let's talk about exclusionary zoning. And so I want to talk about what prohibited, are these laws that prohibited folks to sell property to Black folks. So our government used these fear-based tactics, right? Or these fear-based techniques to create this false narrative that African Americans living in the same neighborhood as white people would ruin property values. They would threaten white property investment. And so zoning regulations were created solely to control density, to protect white open space, and to artificially inflate prices. And so government entities promoted exclusionary zoning as a measure to maintain high property values for white investment. And so if we go on to if we keep moving on and we get into, present day, oops, did I skip one? If we keep going and talk about present day, we fast forward and we know that federal, national, and local initiatives to address homelessness, they start to adopt these shared frameworks. They start to adopt these quote unquote best practices for preventing and ending homelessness. However, never really specifically addressed is, local and disproportionate impact of housing instability on Black and Brown communities. That was not looking at the disproportionate impact. So you saw the numbers before, you saw national numbers, you saw local numbers, and now we're bringing it back home. We see that it wasn't a central focus. It wasn't a central strategy to address the needs of Black and Brown communities as it relates to where folks were housed or how they were being housed. And so we look at, Black folks are shown fewer homes. Landlords have a lot of pull in this, right? We think of COVID and these housing choice vouchers, they can accept or not accept vouchers. We look at family sizes, landlords having you know, the authority to accept people with large or small family sizes. We even have to look at sexual orientation. Landlords having the authority to approve folks based off how they identify sexually. We look at, again, folks steered into different communities. We look at folks being quoted higher loan rates, offer fewer discounts, and then bringing it back to now and what we are experiencing with COVID-19. We even look at our eviction rates and how the eviction rates have skyrocketed since COVID. So I'm gonna pause for a second. Nice. All right, nice. So Daryl, do you want to get into social determinants of health? So how all of that plays out? And I think you're on mute, brother. Daryl, we'll keep going. Daryl, you're on mute.
I was testing y'all, making sure y'all can, making sure y'all think was messed up. I am just checking in, making sure everybody's good, whether you're off camera or not. Give me a thumbs up. Let us know we doing right. We all right. We on path. We on target. Okay. So we're going to talk about the social determinants of health, right? And we're looking at these social determinants of health, and we know that these systems are, systemic racism, and these systems affect every aspect of the social determinants of health, right? From education to healthcare. I mean, we're not telling you anything new, right? From economics, all these different factors, right? Housing. It's funny that, we were just talking about, Nastasia mentioned COVID, and where it was interesting, I had a conversation with a gas station attendant in the heat of COVID, and he had his mask on. He had actually double mask. He said, I got to stay away from you Black guys because you Blacks are more susceptible to COVID. I said, really? He said, yes, because it's in your blood. I said, it's in our blood, really? I said, he seemed like he went to medical school. He was at the gas station. I think he might know what he was talking about. So I said, tell me a little bit more. He said, yeah, you guys got a certain type of blood. That's why you're getting COVID more. I said, so you don't think it has anything to do with housing, living in the projects where, you were close living, right? So if somebody gets in the elevator, they cough, and then somebody else comes in the elevator, or pushing the same buttons, or these close quarters, living in these small apartments where everybody's like all this communal living. You don't think that has anything to do with it? He said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's you Blacks have more. So we talk about, and I only bring that up because it made me think about a lot of the misinformation. This is why we have these conversations, right? We need to have these conversations because many of us are knowledgeable, but then if you're not saying anything, and those of you that have the information, if you're not sharing it with others, then we're also doing a disservice to the communities as well, which leads me into our next slide where we talk about some numbers. And so the data shows that 33% of African Americans, right, were 33% of the deaths were African Americans, right? Now I got a question to the group. We all family, we've been here a little while, so we all together now, right? And I'm not a medical doctor by any means, I might play one on TV, but understand something. If 33% of the people are dying that are African Americans when the vaccination comes out, where should we have been taking the vaccination first? I mean, I'm just saying the math is easy, right? But that's not where we started, right? And then the narrative comes out where, they don't want the shot. They don't, and for good reason. For good reason. History is very clear why, but even though we see that there's a large population of people dying, right? In this one sector, Black and brown people were the leading in deaths. Why wouldn't we focus our energy, our wealth, our information to those communities first? We did not. And I question, feel free to jump into the chat and say what your thoughts are about that. And we could go back into this, just bouncing back to those social determinants of health, the economic stability, the employment, income, expenses, all these different things that keep people stuck in a certain situation. You guys hear what I'm saying? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Where we at? Good? Okay, I'm making sure we're in the building. Making sure, okay. Miss Diane, how you doing over there? You all right?
I'm good, but
All
I
right.
was just getting ready to chat,
Come on
to
in.
say that if they had started with black and brown because of our history, I would have questioned it. I was watching intensely and watching where they were started, and I was like, okay, well, they're going to that population first, so maybe this is not to use us as guinea pigs. I would have been thinking that.
Right,
So
right,
I
right.
understand what you're saying, but I was thinking from a different perspective.
Right, and you know what? It's interesting now. Now history put us in that position where you can't even trust the medical system because of what's happened in the past. So now that made us even number one, poverty and all these other factors, poor healthcare, all these things. And now I don't trust the medical system, which forced more and more people to die. Right. So how would we be thinking like, so many people lost their lives because they're not taking a shot. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to do that based off of the history. So, the medical system has a lot of work to do in itself. So a lot of these systems need work, not just housing. We're talking medical. We need talking all these different systems need to come together because we have a valid reason not to trust that system. Correct? Come on, let's go. We're gonna move to the next slide.
So let's get into understanding some anti-racism language and concepts. And so as this 4-part series goes, I think it's really important that we grasp ourselves and what some of these terms that we're using more frequently really mean. Susan, this next one really speaks to what you had asked earlier in conversation. And so if we can popcorn out, let's move to the next one. If we could start to popcorn out, what is meant by race? What is race? What do you all think race is? Let's do both. What is race and what is racism? Folks can popcorn in. What do you think?
It's Paula.
Yeah, Paula.
I believe race has something to do with how society sees us. Ethnicity is something we're born with.
All right, I'll take it.
I could be wrong.
Nope,
I believe the race is how society view us.
Emphasis on us. Somebody back Paula up. What else do we think race is?
Can jump in. I think race is a social construct. It's not a thing. And racism is I don't know. Racism is more like having the power. You have to have power to be a racist.
Come on.
Which means minorities, Black people, people of color cannot be racist. Yeah, so to be racist, you have to have power. So that is,
all of that. I got you, Paula, Corrine. Awesome. Race was created by folks who don't look like us. And I'm talking about white dominant culture for the purposes of what you just said, Corrine, to establish and maintain power and privilege. Race was constructed for social and political purposes, for working white people from poor and working people from communities of color. And the notion that there were separate racial types influenced by our biological makeup as history allowed it to be. So what you just said, it's not real. When we talk about racism, we do talk about prejudice. And we are all prejudiced in some way, shape, or form because of the way we grew up in this racial culture that socializes us to develop these biases that helps us or has assisted us in leading to assumptions. And so we inherit some of these prejudices, and we're going to talk about racial bias and prejudice and things of that nature. But we all have to admit that we all are in some way, shape, or form based on, where we are in life and how we grew up in our cultural perspectives, that this is something that we haven't inherited.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead, Daryl.
No, I just wanted to jump in. I wanted to push back. I want to push the envelope to some people where, especially my white counterparts that are on the call here. Do you agree in the chat box disagree with some of what Corinne said. Can Black people be racist? Can Black people can Black people be in the power of being racist? I'm gonna just put it out there and you can feel free to jump into the chat box, right? We want you to be involved in the conversation. Yes, yes. Okay, Shauna saying yes, okay? Because Corinne said it's about power, right? But can Black people with no power can they be racist? Can they be prejudiced? And we're gonna get into this conversation. We're gonna get deeper into these conversations because you understand how racism works is where I'm in a position of power that I can deny you something. I can deny you entrance. I can deny you this job. I have power that can control how your outcomes are, right? Whereas prejudice, we're all prejudiced about one thing. This person, I'm 6'5". Some people don't like tall people. Some people don't like short people. Some people don't like people with bald heads. Some people don't like people with hair. All of that, right? But I wanted to just give people an opportunity to chime into the chat and make sure that we talk about that. I really appreciate you, Corinne, saying about the race as being a social construct. Nasashi is going to talk about that right now because we don't talk enough about how race being a social construct is this falsehood that basically keeps us separate. And the more we have these conversations, we find out how much we have in common than what we have different. Let's go. Let's go.
You reminded me of the new Jim Crow. Yeah, you can,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
then Rashad, you and then Rashawn.
Rashawn. Oh, where we at? Who's up?
Jen, I'm
Jen.
up top here.
Jen, what's good?
Yeah, what's up, man? I just wanted to say that I agree that race is a social construct and was put into place for separation and for, hierarchy, just sort of the way that the society is built. I think racism is, a term that's used for similar to what she was saying is, it gets tangled up with like bias and sort of the way that we were raised, like no matter where you were raised, what you were exposed to is comfortable, what you weren't exposed to is uncomfortable. And so then we had these like predispositions about different things. But I think oppression is the thing that you can't have without power. You can't be an oppressor.
Ooh,
Jen,
Jen, you mic dropping? You ain't tell us you was gonna mic drop, Jen. We don't have the mic drop app right here, but yeah.
So,
Appreciate
Jen,
you.
Jen, I want to circle back around to this oppression piece too. So let's stay right here. I love that. We're going to talk a little bit about internalized oppression in a minute. So you took us where we wanted to go. And is it Rashawn?
Rashawn, you in the building? Let's go. I don't know about the color of your hand. You they have the racially correct hand color, right?
Well, wait a minute. It's not Rashawn, Daryl. It's Rashawn. Rashawn. Okay, we both got it messed up. Go ahead, brother.
All right. I'm just gonna say, brother. Yes, you
appreciate that.
You up.
My comment goes along with the oppression.
Oh, you went on mute.
You're on mute. Unmute yourself. I think I did that. I might have did that.
Mute. How did that happen?
I don't know. Let's go. Let's it's technology, bro. We got that Boost Mobile.
Okay, as I was saying, from my experience, we can't be racist. For one, let me give you an example. If I went to in the second grade, I went to an all-white school. I was the only Black kid there. They were able to control everything that I did. In situations moving forward at a job where I'm the only Black person, they're able to control my narrative. We don't have that kind of power. That oppresses us. People will ruin your lives based on their own self-prejudices and racism.
Right.
I have more to say, but I lost some of it, so I'm gonna just leave it.
Well, we welcome you back to the space anytime, brother.
No, that was actually really powerful. And I want to acknowledge that. So thank you for speaking up and speaking your truth, because I can relate. Let's get into racial equity and racial equity lens. So we're talking a lot about what does it mean to be to have a racial, to promote racial equity? What does it mean to embed racial equity? And so folks, just start to popcorn out. What do you think is meant by racial equity? As folks think about racial equity, we can also talk about what it means to utilize a racial equity lens.
In theory, it just means to level the playing field, doesn't it?
Folks, colleagues, anybody want to respond to Jen? Or
Can you
add
say it
on?
again? Jen, what did you say? Can you say it again?
I just said in theory. I mean, it certainly isn't in practice, but in theory, it means leveling the playing field, doesn't it?
I would say it's part of that, and then it's also making sure you have programming that is incorporating context of different perspectives, different racial perspective, different backgrounds. So programming, policies, all of that need to incorporate, need to look at things through a lens of other perspectives.
Absolutely. We wouldn't be.
May I
Yeah.
speak for a sec? I
Yes,
would
Alberto.
think that racial equity is giving someone a say-so, or acknowledging that they have a say-so in what, directly affects them. You know what I mean? So we all experience things differently, oftentimes from race and from class or wealth, and we see things different, right? Some people say, oh, suck it up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, blah, blah, blah. But if you don't have bootstraps or
That's
boots,
right. That's right.
then, and it's something that took me so many years to figure out, or to really like, wow, that is some deep, like, damn, like, because it's not a level playing field, like, just so many examples. But just to say that, if the kids at Kennedy High School had the same books that the kids at Piedmont High School, stuff might be different, you know what I mean? Even just textbooks or whatever, where kids aren't like being fast tracked into special ed, quote unquote, so to make sure that they'll graduate, because they are not at the level of whatever, to graduate, because every year they've gotten just a little bit more behind, because they haven't been taught the same things that prepare people to go to college. You know what I mean? Just to get in, to even for the acceptance test, just for the test to get in, not even your real, can you hang, can you do it? You're just like, basically, here's a bunch of different words that you're never going to hear until it's time for you to take a test to say you can go to school. And then, oh, sorry, you scored a 400. Sorry. Like, it's so skewed. Anyway, but back to the original, is that I think is that, so if you got a bunch of people together, then you would like say, well, what do you guys think about it? And some things might be ridiculous and outlandish, but a lot of it will have a basis, like, yeah, because this is how we experience our world, and you can't expect us to go into the same thing with the same lens, because we see things differently because of the way it's been presented to us, up until now. So that's, so just giving people credit for, like, I've lived this life for a certain way and gone through things because of who I am and how people perceive me. And so I can tell you that this will work or this won't work, or how about something different, because this is how I would respond to that based on what I've been through. Anyway, sorry, a lot of words.
No, I want to respond to that. I like that. And Diane, I see you. And then Mr. Carson, I see you. We would not be talking about racial equity if, if how we identified was not predicted of how society treated us, about how society not only treats Black people, but brown people. Racial equity is being really intentional, you all. It's about being intentional about eliminating those pre-existing policies, those pre-existing practices, those attitudes that really perpetuate racism. And so we cannot begin to think about how to advance racial equity without, first identifying and addressing, what disparities exist. We can go back to the data to start having some of those conversations. As I'm listening, I'm thinking about what would it look like to achieve racial equity by a way of how our society is set up? What does it look like to achieve racial equity by the way of societal conditions? I'm talking about, again, distribution of resources and opportunities is not determined or predicted by racial bias, racial ideology, or how race is constructed in our society. I'm talking about structures and systems that perpetuate these cultural narratives, these false cultural narratives in society that prevent true situational fairness and equal opportunities. I'm talking about our commitment and your commitment to dismantle false narratives of white supremacy, address, legal, political, societal, historical contributors to inequities. And so when we talk about racial equity in a larger, big picture, these are some of the things that come to mind. And these are some of the things that I want folks to think about aloud. Ms. White.
Yes, I was just thinking about this level playing field. If we were to level the playing field right now in 2021, it still wouldn't do the job, because how do we make up for all those past years where we're so behind? So we have to be able to give more and change mindsets and different things that we have not had opportunities for, the ability to go to school, the ability to take tests and understand what certain words are. All of those things have to be taken care of. To level the field right now wouldn't do us any good, because there's so much that we have to overcome.
Right,
I like that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I just want to jump in really quickly, because I didn't want to lose Alberto's boot comment about, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. We've all heard that before, but I want to push it a little further. What if you grew up in this area, and this is kind of what Dana was talking about with the equity piece, right? If you grew up in a neighborhood where everybody had boots, you ain't never noticed that nobody didn't have boots until you got into this work and realized that everybody doesn't have boots. And see, this is how this is perpetuated, because you grew up in this society or this culture where everybody has boots. Everybody has boots, or you grow up where nobody has boots, so you didn't even realize that you were supposed to have boots. You see, this is where we need to be using this equity. This is where you need to be using this. This is where, like, if you looked at the video in the beginning, at the end, it comes up with the bulldozer. What we are trying to create is, when we have these conversations, is disruptors. We want everybody to disrupt this, because this system has existed because so many people either turned a blind eye, it's not affecting me, got nothing to do with me, I'm gonna keep doing, I got mine, you gotta get yours, right? That mentality, understanding that it's not a level playing field. So therefore, you may have to interject, and just getting that Black Lives Matter t-shirt ain't enough. The sign on the lawn ain't enough. Attending the march ain't enough. Understand something, my friends. If nothing else, silence is compliance. So if you are being silent when these systems are happening, you are being compliant. You are not helping the cause. So let's go, man. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Where we at?
So Daryl, we're at Racial Equity Lens, and I'm happy that you mentioned those, because here's what I think about when we start to talk about using this racial equity lens into frameworks. I want to ask this: are we giving attention to systems and structures that reinforce racial biases among your staff, along, Contra Costa's grantees, organizational partners, and policies? Are we applying a racial equity lens to what we already know, see, and understand? I go back to the data. Are we disaggregating outcomes by race and ethnicity? Are we disaggregating our data by race, ethnicity, and then other factors, and analyzing how racial equity, or how racial groups more specifically, have different outcomes?
Wow.
Do we even have people of color leading the work and utilizing their lens to inform the work? You are big, Daryl, on having folks at the table with lived experience. More specifically, do we have Black, Indigenous, people of color at the table with lived experience to lead the work? Utilizing a race equity lens reveals this reality that often goes unnamed because of what you just mentioned. We don't have people at the table who look like us with that lived experience piece. I see folks, and so I don't want to leave folks out, but I do want to move along. But Joe, you've had your hand up for some time. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Joe Bruno here, and I just wanted to chime in about the graph that you showed earlier at the beginning of the presentation.
Yeah.
The difference between equality and equity,
Yeah.
because we literally have to meet people where they're at in order to get moving forward. Like, we have to understand the ancestral trauma. We have to understand that the education was horrible. And going on with the bootstrap analogy, like, I grew up in a place that, I grew up in Parkside where we did not have boots. None of us had boots. But when I was finally able to get out in my adult livelihood, I realized because I am white, I had straps. Even though I didn't have boots growing up, I was able to get through the system. And so seeing that, I'm bringing all of that when I'm doing any work, like just knowing that is that lens that I'm bringing. So that's it. Thanks.
No, I love it. I love your perspective. Thank you for putting yourself out there. I appreciate that. We appreciate that.
Appreciate you, Joe. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to white privilege. So you all will get the slides and you all can see here's my my quotations, the politically correct definitions. But remember, we don't have time for the politically correct stuff today. You get that a little bit later on. Let's get into white privilege. Bina, let's play the clip and then Daryl, I'll pass it back to you.
Let's go.
I'm trying to leave. And I got the super neighbor over here blocking me in. This is what I'm dealing with right now. This is who I'm dealing with. Napoleon, move out the way.
My name's David Stewart.
I don't care what your name is. Get out the way.
My picture, that's my name.
I don't care. Move out the way, sir. Please hurry up so you can have this a-hole move out the way so I can leave.
I asked you one question.
No, it's none of your business, and I asked. It is not.
No, it is my business.
Why? You the mayor of the cul-de-sac?
Yeah, I'm President of the Owners Association.
Okay.
These are private streets.
And apparently you need a gate code to get in here, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So how did I get in here? It was none of your business. I'm going out. That's where I'm going, but you're in my way. So then move out the way then. Tom, it's a bad day. I got the president of the Homeowners Association over here at this last stop, got me blocked in so I can't leave. And he called the cops because he wants to know where I'm going and I didn't want to tell him. I don't have the mental capacity to deal with this right now. I'm trying to leave. What do you mean, why? None of your business? Did I deliver it to your house? Because it's none of your business, that's why. You're asking questions, you don't need to ask questions. All you need to do is have your buddy move his car so I can leave and go about my business. How do I make a wrong turn into a gated neighborhood? I need to have a gate code in order to get in, right? That's common sense, right? So if I had a gate, if I'm in here, I had a gate code, right? That's none of your business. Yet again, it sure as hell isn't. I'm not in the wrong. I don't know who this is. What's your name? Uh-huh. I'm in the wrong. Show me your badge then. Uh-huh. I don't give a what you got.
You do realize this is all private property.
You do realize this is unlawful detainment, right? You have absolutely no reason and no right to hold me here, to block me in with your car. You don't need to know anything.
This is private. Okay, that's fine.
The private property that you own is probably somewhere up there.
Private property, I own 1/18 of what you're sitting on. This street is private.
1/18 of what I'm sitting on.
City property. This street is maintained by the people that live in there.
Mm-hmm.
This is private.
And apparently one of the people that live here it gave me a gate code. You're not helping me. You being nosy. That's all you're doing. You're trying to use privilege and you're not getting it from me. You can apologize too. It wasn't your fault, sir. I don't understand what his need or purpose was for doing that. Normally, I probably could have handled it a little different, a little better, but emotionally, I got a lot of things going on. So I never left my seat, never left the truck, never took my seatbelt off. I'm finally out of there. So I'm about to start driving seriously now. Thank y'all for being there for me. I catch y'all on the flip side.
Wow, wow. So I see the chat box lighting up. Definitely appreciate it. You know, I see a lot of empathy in there too, right? Empathy, not sympathy, right? You could actually feel what this brother was feeling at that opportune time. And I also see some people talking about being tired. You know, as a Black man in this country, it is a little frustrating and tiring at time after time to have to experience that. Anybody else want to chime in? Chime in. I'm looking for some comments.
Yeah, can I do it without having to write it out in chat?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah,
Peter. Let's
absolutely.
go.
And you know what?
I
And
just-
Peter, before
Yeah,
you
I
go, Bina, can you bring us all together so we can have a little bit of dialogue around white privilege? Can you? Thanks.
Well, I'm a privileged white man, and I was a couple of years ago, I was driving through, I guess, what's called the Iron Triangle in Richmond, and I got lost, and I was looking at my cell phone to try to get the GPS right. A police woman pulled up beside me on her motorcycle, and I realized, oh, gee, I should not have been doing this. I rolled all down the window and said, "I'm sorry, officer, you got me fair and square." She said, "Well, where are you going?" So I explained to her where I was headed to, and she said, "Oh, well, you're going the wrong way. I tell you what, take a U-turn down here at this next light, and then go back and take the first left and then the next right, and it's about a quarter of a mile where we're going." Okay, well, good luck, sir. That was a Black woman talking to me, a privileged white man in Richmond. I'm moved almost to tears and ashamed of myself for having been so privileged and receiving such respect and kindness from that motorcycle cop.
Appreciate you, Peter. Thank you for sharing that. You know, that hasn't been my experience. Usually, that wasn't my experience with the police. Usually, it's a different outcome. But I appreciate you. You know, because if nothing else, my friends, what we want to make sure that we're doing is acknowledging this privilege. Because if you can acknowledge it, then you can see where your power can play at. I see Joe make some comments, and then so there's opportunity here, not to just but own it and say, listen, I'm going to intervene where I can. Right? That doesn't mean Peter should have said, I want you to give me a ticket. I want you to treat me like a Black man. You ain't get the ticket. That's good, Peter. We want you to do that. But being able to acknowledge it is very powerful, and I appreciate you. Someone else. There's some key points in that video. We're looking for them. What else did you see in the video?
This is Diane again. Born and raised in Oakland, California, 77th Avenue. 30 years ago, my husband and I bought a home in San Ramon. When our children were teenagers, they went to the Lucky store, Safeway store in Dublin. We have one in Dublin, one in San Ramon. They stopped them and asked them, why are you in this store? And they said, well, we came to get some things. We're standing in line now. They said, well, why this store? Why don't you go to the store in San Ramon where you live? Which is a couple of blocks. We're right in the middle. And so, you know, they couldn't even be in the store. They weren't doing anything. They just wanted, you know, and they came back so upset. And I was upset for them, ready to go and find the policeman who wanted to know why they were in the store.
Right. And see, what we're talking about is narrative. This is a belief that the policeman believed that he was right. The homeowner believed that he was right, you know, to intervene, to interject in this person's, hey, Roz, I seen you on mute. What you got? Rosina, tell me how you say your name. I said
Rosina.
I tried to be cool, right? I tried to act like I knew you, right?
I was like, is he talking to me? I'm not sure. No, but
How you say your name?
I'm Rosina,
Rosina.
and I'm with Hope Solutions. Really happy to be here. I just wanted to point out something simple. The fact that while the truck driver drove away, they put on the screen that he had to call the police and make sure that he was not still somehow liable for literally doing his job. Yeah. That to me is so important to point out, that this is not just, oh, we got the one guy to get off my back, he moved his car. This man now has a target on his back. Even though the narrative of the story is completely false, it will always lie with the other white supremacist powers that be, and that he literally has to be above and beyond to prove that I should be able to do my job, and just a super reality of how a lot of us live every single day. And just small point that I thought was important.
No,
that's huge point, Rosina. Really huge point.
I want to continue to paint this picture of what white privilege looks like, because I've never experienced white privilege, never will experience white privilege, but what else does it look like? What else does it look like within our organization? What else does it look like within our statuses, our social statuses?
I'd like to say it goes beyond color.
Okay.
Just being a woman, there's inequities.
The experience of being not the only one of your race in the same job, classroom, same thing as being a Black woman in these spaces. Absolutely. What else is?
Can I say something?
Yeah, for sure.
My experience in dealing with the homeless is I've even dealt with white privilege from homeless white clients, where they still talk down to you. They use racial terms and everything. Right. So it's levels to it. Right. And that's from my personal experience.
Yep. It reminds me of like, the experience of folks not questioning your intellectual capabilities based on how you present. That's what that reminds me of. What else?
I think it's not being questioned at all about anything. Anything you do is all right to do because you are who you are.
Right. Jen.
I wanted to say, can I say one more thing?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I noticed something in that video with the guy you shared.
Okay.
Did anybody notice him talking the whole time on the phone, talking to the people that was, interacting with him, right? Did you notice at the end when he was on the phone, he still said, well, I think I could have did that better, maybe. See, we do that as Black men. We do that. He did nothing wrong to me.
I was waiting for that.
He was quiet, and he still felt like he needed to apologize.
He did apologize. I was waiting for that. I was trying to get a couple brothers in just to understand that even in the culture, right? The experience of the need to apologize when you're not wrong. If you have not experienced that, you have not been in that position where even though you were not wrong, you still said, I could have done that a little better. You know what? I got a lot going on in my life. Did he have to say that? I got some white friends that will curse the police out at a traffic stop. Literally go in and I'm like, oh my God. Me personally, at all times, I am trying to de-escalate the situation. I am trying to let the officer know he is safe. That's not my job, but that's what we do. Jen, let's get you in this conversation. Thank you. This is good stuff.
I don't know if this got brought up.
I just want to add, we're also.
Hold on, we got Jen coming in, and I got you, Tanya. Come on in, we got you.
Who's up?
Jen, then Tanya.
Okay, I just wanted to come. I don't know if this got brought up or not. I had a call that I had to take real quick, but one of the things that I was thinking about too with that video, man, is that one thing that doesn't get brought up in the video itself is what happens to that gentleman after the fact that all this drama has taken place. When he's done and he finally gets out of that place, he's late for other appointments now. He's late getting deliveries off. He's late. He might be getting customer complaints called in on him, which just kind of reiterates and exacerbates the impression that the employer might have had in the first place. So it's just like all of these things start to impact the impression that we have of folks of color. in the workplace and everything like that, when they're getting held up or when they're getting accosted in these situations that they have no reason to be getting, slowed down for, that impacts so many other things in the process of that day.
Right. Appreciate you, Jen. Hey, Tanya, what you got? And then Jim, I got you in the corner.
Back to the film, a couple of things. Number one, there's a film that I shared with my staff before about the talk that you have with your Black males before they leave the house. Being a mom that has African-American boys. So sometimes they're second guessing because the rules don't get belligerent, because that can make the situation worse. And then also just looking at the film and there's other films where white people feel like they can police Black people. It's not your permission to police and stop people on the street. You're not that's not your authority, but that's kind of how not all white folks can do sometimes. They feel like they're the police and the threat to call police, and that's going to have an impact. But it also goes back to what you guys are saying about the guy saying, I could have did this better. It's also, we already have in our mindset when we walk out the door, how we're supposed to act if something happens. And no matter what, we're supposed to keep our cool. So that's the pressure of that as well.
I appreciate you, Tanya. Thank you. Jim, you want to jump in?
Yeah, and just with respect to the video, I'm sitting here laughing almost at how obnoxious the two residents were. And then right after he pulls out of there and he's on his own, just talking to the camera after he's done dealing with that, there's just some expression on his face that I can't really explain. It wasn't tangible, but all of a sudden, like the stuff that I was laughing at isn't that funny anymore, even though it was obnoxious. But and just with respect to white privilege, I've been in countless meetings, countless conferences, or just with my wife, for instance. She's calling the shots on something and people are looking at me like I'm supposed to be the one to answer, or going into these meetings and where there's multiple people ahead of me, above me, in management, and people are looking at me just because of the way I look relative to whoever else is in the meeting. It's people aren't intentionally doing it, but it's out there every day.
Right. Appreciate you, Jim. We didn't get to the implicit yet. We get to the implicit and explicit bias. We really appreciate you chiming in. Nastasia is going to take us out. I just really appreciate everyone, being their authentic self. If you didn't get to share this time, we're going to get back together again and really think about these things that we're talking about. Nastasia, where are we going next?
Well, I think, Jim, you bring us to where we want to be when we start to think about bias and microaggressions. We're going to get a little bit into racial bias a little bit later, but acknowledging that, we do hold those biases, unconscious and conscious, knowing that microaggressions within our workplace, within our social realms exist. And then I want to talk about how we can name those, address those, and steer away from our bias, or being conscious of the bias that we perpetuate, as well as those microaggressions that Black and Brown folks experience. I want to move us along also to this internalized piece. And I can't remember if it was Jen who I said, hey, let's pump the brakes because we're going to talk about this. So Daryl, do you want to give us some insight about internalized oppression?
Yeah, and I think that just leads us right back to the video, right? The brother was monitoring how, if you see the gentleman in the video, his own internal stuff makes him want to apologize, makes him question if he was right, makes him question how many times. I really appreciate Rahan, if I'm saying your name right. I really appreciate what he says, because I've been in those meetings too that Jim talks about. And sometimes I have to, I'm always conscious of, am I where I am? And a lot of times many of us, I'm sure on this call, speak with our hands, and I'm animated and I'm like, yes. And that might be passion, but sometimes that passion can scare people, right? They ready to call security when I'm in a meeting. I'm like, yeah, but we need to make sure that everybody gets housed and everybody gets boots. And they be like, whoa, you know, and I'm like, and then someone pulls me aside and says, I see, Daryl, that you're upset. I'm like, I'm not upset. I'm just passionate, right? So we got to be able to, no matter where you are, I love that there's a lot of leadership on this call, because whether you're a white leader or a black leader, you need to be able to articulate to other leaders that Daryl is not upset. He's just passionate. Y'all hear what I'm saying? Thumbs up, thumbs up. Let me know you hear what I'm talking about, because you need to be able to talk about that. We're going to go, Nastasia, you're going to take us to the mural. We're going to jump right into the mural.
We're going to jump right into the mural. Bina's going to take us there. So the question is this, while Bina cues up the screen, how might internalized oppression impact organizational culture? So one, I am going to drop the link, copy in the chat. Give me 2.5 seconds. Those of you who were able to get into mural and cue it up, that's great. Bina, can you go ahead and share your screen for the mural? Perfect, I see folks are in there. Folks, in mural, what you can do on your trackpad is do your fingers open and close to zoom. So open to zoom, close to bring it back. Bina, if you could, go ahead and zoom us into question 1. So for people who cannot see or utilize the mural, can see some of the chat functionality. So what I want you to do is just pick a dot or pick a circle, double click it, and type in your response. I know they seem really small now, but when they come out, we'll be able to actually see them. So the question is, how might internalized oppression impact organizational culture? The other reason why we like to use this interactive platform is because we want to leave you all with a product. A part of this training in this engagement is to make sure there's some leave behind products. And so this being one of them, so you all can refer back to, build upon, things of that nature.
Right, and while you're doing that, I just want to just chime in about, we didn't get a chance to talk about the trauma, right? The trauma that was, right, that the gentleman's gonna go home with. That doesn't leave you tomorrow. When he goes home, he's gonna think about that experience, and that traumatic experience sticks with you. Right, and for those of us that have been in those situations that look like that gentleman, right, we also are traumatized, right? Because even though that didn't happen to us, it's happened to us. If you can relate to what I'm saying, give me a thumbs up. Let me know you know what I'm talking about, because it doesn't necessarily, this is where that historical and like slavery, we're still affected by slavery. We talk about that a lot of times, how that opportunity that we have not had an opportunity to heal from that. Many of us still struggle with those that as well. So a lot of these things affect us internally. That internalized oppression that we're talking about stems from slavery, stems from events that happened to others that didn't happen to me directly, but I am affected by it. I'm affected every time I watch that video. I feel that.
I want to start to read some of these out loud.
We got somebody, Jamie wants to make sure, how do we add comments? You should be able to click on your circle once you're in the link and be able to add a comment there, and let us know if you're having any problems with that.
Folks who are having problems, just chat into the chat box here on Zoom, and we'll make sure we'll get your comments in here. So the question, how might internalized oppression impact organizational culture? And I'm going to read some of these out loud. Someone says, deferring to white leadership. Absolutely. We're going to talk about white dominant cultural norms in later sessions, but this has come up numerous times. What else do we have? Discourage speaking one's truth. Absolutely. Almost like what Daryl had mentioned. He painted a picture of, him being passionate about something and him speaking his truth, but it can be, and most of the time it is taken out of context. I.e. the angry Black woman is not always the angry Black woman. It's the passionate woman. It's the Black woman who is really into what she's saying and wants to vocalize that in a way to show passion. people not being leaders of color, or people not backing leaders of color. Yeah, absolutely. I think about the pathways into leaderships for people who look like me. We see across the nation that a lot of organizations lack this way of pathway into leadership for folks of color. Let's see.
We're going. Feel free, if you can't get into the mural, feel free to chime in the chat box as well.
Oh, this is a spicy one. I love this. Not feeling like they can be their authentic selves at work. When can we ever be our authentic selves at work? There's this notion of code switching. If you don't know what it is, we don't have time to get into it today. Google it. We are always having, when I say we, Black and brown folks are always having to do this thing called code switching, which does not allow us to show up as our full authentic selves. Snaps to this one. Yes, absolutely. It would be a burden feeling like people don't always assume their best. Yes, lack of trust, denial of racist practices. This is why we are having this conversation today, because a lot of people across the nation are in denial. Someone in the chat mentioned, sure thing, glad that there's social media out there. Yes, it is being televised now. It never stopped happening, right? It's just being televised. What are others? Can affect hiring practices. Yes, a lot of organizations are taking measures to remove red tape when it comes to who is qualified. We can't find a qualified Black person to take the job. No, what is your definition of things being qualified, right? Okay, nice. So time is up here, but we can continue building on these. You all did great. Lack of diversity, culture feels bifurcated, biased ways of evaluating performance. Absolutely. I wish we had more time to talk about these more in depth.
Right. And I encourage leadership, because I know there's a lot of leadership on the call, which I really appreciate. I salute your organization for bringing a ton of leadership here. But let's go through, take some time and read through these and see when we start to talk about changes in culture. Here's your board right here. Not a lot of times organizations, number one, a lot of organizations, I was on a call earlier talking about checking the box. The way you don't check the box is by taking some of these statements and ideas and figuring out how do we make change within our organization, which within our culture. And that's a joint effort. That's having people with lived experience, people of color at the table when these decisions are being made, when we start to talk about making change.
Oh yeah. Nice. Being looked over in the workforce.
JC,
nice.
Jump in, feel free. Okay.
You all did great navigating this. I know it looks busy, but you all are in here. All right, let's switch gears.
And we will share this with you, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Stasia, we're gonna.
Oh yeah, for sure. This is theirs. After, yep. This is theirs after this session. Absolutely. All right. So Bina, if you could bring us back, I would appreciate it. And if you all would come back to the main screen.
JC, appreciate you. Susan, thank you for updating. Thank you for adding to the chat box. Christina, see you in the chat box. Appreciate you.
All right. So while Bina's getting us back to the main screen, and Bina, I don't see it yet, but we're going to talk about the levels of racism. And so I like to say there's levels to this, folks, right? And so whether we choose to agree or accept that racism, in fact, exists throughout multiple levels, what's even more interesting here is that we all play a role in perpetuating racist policy practices throughout each level. And so what we want to do is we want to spend time talking about the systemic level, the individual level, the interpersonal level, and how that plays out within our homelessness networks, within our personal and private networks to give you all a better understanding about what this looks like. Okay, nice. So Daryl, can you start us off with talking about the first level of racism, the systemic?
We're on the systemic. So the systemic racism, thank you for kicking that to me, Nastasia. Systemic racism, the infrastructure of ruling ordinances and statutes, right? So whereas we see society's certain rights and privileges, right? Many of us understand like that systemic, many of these systems, and as I said earlier, criminal justice reform advocate and activist. We talk about systems all the time, educational, housing, where we talk about the rights and privileges while denying other groups in society the same rights and privileges because of long established cultural prejudices, religious prejudices, fears, myth, xenophobia, and held to an entitled group, right? So a lot of these systems are, number one, are long systemic racism. It has a history, right? And it just keeps going. And this is why I say that like people like Jim and Leslie and other people who have chimed in, right? Joe, who mentioned things, this is the role that we're asking. We can't just, one group can't keep saying there's systemic racism unless we all are saying this is systemic racism. That's those changes, it comes from a group effort. It comes from interjecting at the meetings, right? If I'm looking around a meeting and we're talking about making racial change within our organization, in our system, and I don't see any Black and brown people at the meeting cannot go on. And someone needs to say that. But if we go on and talk about change, and the people that we're talking about making change for are not a part of those conversations, then Alicia, guess what? Those meetings should not go on. And the onus is on us, those individuals that see it. But for so long, systemic racism exists for people for one reason or another turning a blind eye. Doesn't have anything to do with me. I don't want to be the outlier. I don't want to be the person to say anything. I don't know what to do. Many people say to us when we're doing these trainings, well, Daryl, I don't know where to get in at. I'm just one white person. I don't know. Well, it starts with the one. It starts with your voice. It starts with you interjecting. Let's go to the next. You want to keep going, Nastasia? You want to chime in? What are we doing?
Well, Daryl, it would be great if we could talk about what we need to do. So we talk about systemic racism, and we talk about how every system needs to be questioned. And so if we could take our folks into, who's benefiting from these systems, acknowledging who's being harmed, who's being left out, to paint a picture of systems that perpetuate racism, I think that will be helpful.
Absolutely.
Let's move on. So Daryl, can you talk about how these systems are set up?
Well, I love this group because I feel like we're preaching to the choir, but let's go through it, right? We see it in the educational system, right? We see it in the educational system. When we talk about, like, I remember working with inner city schools, and they're talking about, we're going to do a fundraiser, right, Miss Diane? We're doing a fundraiser and we're trying to get $500. If we could get $500, we hit our mark. Then I go to the suburban school and they say, our mark is 50,000. If we could get 50,000, see right there, just, you want to see it in an educational system, look around. When you see a swimming pool versus, or you see a book cart versus a library, right? So then we start to see how this really plays out and how the housing and the taxes of the housing feed the school system, right? So if you live in better housing, then your school system is what? Quote unquote better. But if you're blocking people from getting into that housing, then they're only subjected to what? Poor school systems. And if you're subjected to poor school systems and your education is lower, then you're never going to get to those suburban houses, right? See, this system is designed, we talking truth right here, right? We're seeing this, right? State government, local, who are the politicians? How do you get to the state and local government? Who are they talking to? Really quickly, I remember we were talking during COVID. We were talking about, we were talking to our local politicians and we said, listen, we got to keep the laundromats open. We have to keep the laundromats open. And one of our local leaders in the political world said, why? Doesn't everybody have a washer and dryer in their house? See, we know that where he come from, everybody got a washer and dryer in their house. That's not my reality, right? But see, if you grew up where everybody had boots, then you would think everybody got a washer and dryer in the house. political leadership, this is where our roles are to educate that everybody doesn't have a washer and dryer in the house, right? In the healthcare system, we talked about COVID. We talked about how people are treated from the healthcare system, this systemic, right? If you show up with one insurance card, if you in Connecticut, if you got a gray insurance card, then you're going to get the minimal medical treatment. But if you come in with that Blue Cross or Blue Shield, man, they're going to run every test possible. They're going to say, Ms. Diane, you got to go. You're going to get the single room. You're going to get the soda. They're going to give you some treats and everything, or they're going to give you a Band-Aid, depending on where you come from and what your insurance level is. And based off of sometimes the skin color and what address you come from is how you're going to be treated. I'll just throw another piece in there. I work with a group of people where they come from a certain address. One lady was having a heart attack, and when she got to the hospital, they said, "We're not giving you pills," because of the address. She's like, I'm having a heart attack. I'm not here pill searching. But see, they talk to you a certain way, and then we need to go into how law enforcement sees the different communities, right? When we talk about suburban communities, right? And hey, Officer Joe, how's it going? Versus being in the urban community where the communities are being policed, right? They're being policed, and there's a difference when police officers are interacting in a suburban community versus an urban community, because there's a belief that I need to instill order. I need to make sure that these people walk a straight line, but you do not treat people in the suburban community the same way, because they would not tolerate that. They would not tolerate that. In the justice system, man, we already know that, the justice system already has this disproportionate, right? Because if you don't have enough money for a lawyer, you find yourself in these systems, right? This is why 64, that we say, depending on how they're categorizing people, 75% of the people that are in the criminal justice system are Black and brown people, right? And then we already talked about the housing, how that affects when you get out of housing. Now, because you have that criminal record, you can't go back and be with your family because it's federal housing and you can't go back in there. Come on, I see some chat in the chat box. Let me know we're talking right. Thumbs up. Somebody want to chime in real quick.
Daryl, can I chime in?
Yup, and JC got her head. JC got the hand up again. Let's go.
Daryl, when I think about the law enforcement, our history has shown us that, from slavery, folks have went into jails and prison, and then fast forward, as we look forward into the present, we see folks going into homelessness, exiting into jails and prison, to paint a more like futuristic picture. And so I'm wondering about folks' thoughts about the criminal justice system as it relates to one, how, this not only does the criminal system, justice system perpetuate these inequalities, but we look at present day and our folks that we serve exiting, not going into permanent housing, into jails and prisons. Just a snapshot of you all's thoughts.
Right. JC, we're going to bring you into the conversation, and we got you, Ms. Diane, coming right after. JC?
I'm going to go ahead and stay off the camera because honestly, I'm tearing up because Daryl, you brought up my childhood.
Yeah.
And it's very unfortunate that I am AARP right now. And so that's telling you how long ago this happened in Bayview, Hunters Point, San Francisco, where I was born and raised. And it's still happening now in the present time and day. And I'm really hoping that this conversation is really embedding in folks' spirits to really understand what us folks go through. In this present time and day, you would think that all of this training, these sessions, like I said in the chat, yes, the conversations are surfaced, they're brought up, but then unintentionally, folks go back to the truth. And I think with educating in our systems and these continuous courageous conversations, Daryl, this is one of the most courageous sessions I've ever attended. And I thank you for your transparency and your truth in this.
Appreciate you.
Diane, I felt you when you talked about what we experienced in East Oakland and San Ramon. It's the truth. The children till this very time and day experience that. So Diane, thank you for sharing your transparency because I felt every bit of that.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to share, you said something about the law enforcement in the suburbs. The law enforcement in the suburbs are still not good for those of us who are brown and Black. in the suburbs. We were having a 97th birthday party here, and so many cars and we have a huge family. And we had the police sitting at the corner watching the house because it was just way too many Black and brown people in
Right.
one house.
Right.
So, I mean, it doesn't, just because you're in the suburbs, if you're in the suburbs and you're white, you're okay. But if
Right.
you're in the suburbs and you're Black, you're still questioned.
They got to keep an eye on you, you know. And next time
They have to watch. Yes, they do.
Ms. Diane, I want to make sure I get an invite to the next one because I know y'all have some food on that grill. I know.
Okay.
I know y'all did it right. I know y'all did it right up there. So I want to just check in with others. Anybody else? I want to bring, hey, Gary, you want to jump into this conversation? John, y'all more than welcome to jump in. Just looking around the room to see if anybody else want to chime in on some of these systems, systemic racism, these systems that perplex Black and brown people. Anybody else? I appreciate you, Butler. C. Butler, I appreciate you.
So I have a question that I just put it in the chat box, but tying this back to our programming and our housing, I'm not on the front line, so I don't do things like the VI SPDAT, and I'm not the one doing things like related to our access to our coordinated entry. And I would love to, although I don't want to stir the pot, that's probably requires more than the 8 minutes we have left, but I would love to tie this back to our programming and our COC. If there's a way to do that.
Yes.
Absolutely. We could talk about that. Let's jump right back to the COCs because I know there's a lot of comments around housing, systems of housing and preventing people from housing and how these systems play out. So let's go to that. Great. Thank you, Dana, for bringing that up. Let's go right. We'll spin it right back.
We're talking about housing, right?
Let's talk about housing. Let's tie it back to our work, our current work.
Anybody want to chime in? What you see on the ground? You guys do this work.
I have an example.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's go.
So I have a client last week. He said he found a place that wanted to rent to him. Sells a studio apartment in Berkeley for $2,500. Okay, sorry, I had to turn the echo off. Can you hear me?
Yes.
2,500, 30-year-old African-American male. So my program manager is a white, almost 60-year-old woman. She called on the phone and was told $300 cheaper.
Wow.
Just want to throw that out there so y'all know that happened.
Right. Appreciate it. And how do we deal with that? How do you deal with that? How do we deal with that?
I think it's very much the same thing that we've been talking about. That in the development of the tools, the VI SPDAT, the CES, these tools that get developed need as much diversity as anything. And as the leadership continues to look homogenous and primarily white in leadership, you're going to be getting a biased trend. We were just doing a program with HUD where they're coming up with this thing you just showed us today. And we had to revamp some of the questions because it was a white woman that was doing it. Not that she was intentional about having it be biased. It is just the bent. It is being a human being. And if you don't recognize that you need to remove yourself from the default of who should lead, we're going to continue that hamster wheel.
Right. I really appreciate that. Somebody else really want to chime in? I would love to give another example of how we see where, like a lot of times we see it across the country, they're tearing down the housing projects, right? And they're saying this is good because we shouldn't have them. We're going to tear these housing projects down. But what they didn't do the research and understand how within the housing projects are communities, right? So on the second floor, I could go to Miss Jones and she could watch my kids. Mr. So-and-so fixes cars. I could borrow a couple of dollars from Paula on the fourth floor. So when you break up these housing projects, you break up communities, right? So now you put me in a nice little house in the suburbs, but I don't know my neighbors. So now I'm out there alone where I was in a community. So when we think about tearing and dismantling communities, how do we move these communities together and keep them whole? Because we don't talk about that enough when we talk about housing. When we talk about housing discrimination, we think that because we come with it with one lens, one pair of boots, we think moving somebody into their own house solves all their problems, right? That doesn't solve all their problems. It might actually create more problems. How many of you seen somebody get housed and have more problems than they had when they were homeless? Come on, man, we talking right. We ain't come to play no games. We came to talk right today.
I want to jump in real quick and just give a little example. So when I was homeless just recently, I was in my car for about a year and a half, and I was considered one of the lucky ones because I had a car. And I had some back-to-back crises, and there was a moment when the cops, the enforcement came through our downtown city, and they wiped out all of the house. Like the tents were torn down, beds were like thrown in like to the side. Stuff was even burnt. Like there was this burn pile afterwards. But then like days later, the mental health behind that was so traumatizing. And when I went back and started to talk to the community, it turned out that most of the equipment and most of the material that was burnt was from the Black communities who were down there. And the tents that were destroyed were all from the people of color. And then like most of, quote unquote, the white folks, we were fine. We didn't get touched when they came back and swiped out the homeless population. So that always sticks with me. And like I said, that was just last year. I mean, through COVID even, like, you know what I mean? Like this was just last year. So it's just horrible.
Right, JC, we really appreciate your voice, and I'm hoping that you're at these COC tables. I'm hoping if you're not connected to JC and others, you need to, this is a networking opportunity for all of us to stay connected, because this thing doesn't happen in silos. Like you said, this thing is real, and this is happening right now. We're not talking history. We gave you a little history, but we're talking about the things that are happening right now. Nastasia, how are you?
This is a really great conversation. I realize that we still have other levels to cover, but there's no way we're going to cover them in 3 minutes. That wouldn't be equitable. So let's do this. We're going to pick up where we left off last time, but before we leave out today, we just can't leave and say goodbye. What's one thing that you all took away from this conversation today? And we can just popcorn in, 2 minutes left. I'm just checking your pulse. I know we've been on for quite some time, but one thing that you've either learned, one thing that you've taken away from this conversation, one thing that you will share with someone after we hang up today, what is one thing you're taking away? You all can also call out really quickly in the minute that we have left, but one thing.
Come on, making sure like we did our job. Come on, we watching. Come on, let's go. Did we do our work? What's going on? Let's talk about it.
I learned that I'm not going to apologize if I'm not wrong anymore in my life.
It. Snap.
Appreciate you.
Period.
No doubt.
Drops mic.
We got to stop belittling ourselves, right? I'm gonna take you up on that. I'm gonna try to stop doing that myself.
What are others?
Learn to stand up and say something.
Do not stay silent. Silence is compliance. Absolutely. What are others?
Others. Let's go.
I'm gonna take the truth of others with me, and honor their truths.
Honor people's truths. Absolutely.
Yep.
What else?
I'd say we recognize we still have a lot to do in our own system of care. You know, just the chat box right now, like there's so much we need to do locally right here within our programs and our work.
Right,
yep, absolutely. And continuously tying in these frameworks back to our COC and back to the work that we actually do. So Dana, thank you for putting that out there today.
No, and I really appreciate that with the COC work, right? The work that you're doing. Think about, we have the opportunity to Zoom. We have the opportunity to leave our house, go in your refrigerator. There's so many people out there that are dependent on this system to do the next right thing, right? So there are people right now depending on you guys to help them get to where you're at, right? A lot of times people are just helping people survive, man. I'm about getting people to thrive in. I want to see people thrive. I don't want to see them just survive, because many of us here are very fortunate. We've come from a long way to be where we are today. They're able to Zoom from your house or your office. We want other people to have the same experiences. That's when we start to talk about equity and equality. That's why we're here today. Let's go. Anybody else want to chime in? What else you taking with you? What else you taking with you? Hopefully we doing our job.
Nice. We are at the hour, folks. Jamie, Erica, did you want to say something before we logged off? I know I just put you on the spot, but I just wanted to make sure it wasn't anything you wanted to communicate before we departed today.
No, just that these sessions are being recorded, and we will try and make sure that we make all of this information available to everyone as soon as possible. And just, you know, stick with us, stick with this process. We value your participation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I believe the next session is scheduled for August 9th. Is that correct, Jamie and Erica? Yes.
That is correct. August 9th, 1 to 3.
August 9th, 1 to 3.
Or
all right.
4 to whatever your time is.
Something similar. All right, we appreciate you all. Thank you so much for being in the community with us. Until next time, folks. Until next time. Thank you.
Take care. Take care. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See you.